He laughed at his wife's empty suitcase in court. Seconds later, his own lawyer stood up and called her Madam Chairman. The courtroom smelled of polished mahogany and broken promises. Harry Ashford sat at the plaintiff's table like a king surveying his kingdom, his $40,000 Brioni suit catching the light from the tall windows of the Manhattan Supreme Court. He was 28 years old, devastatingly handsome, and worth $4.2 billion. Today was supposed to be a formality, a signature, a final humiliation. His soon-to-be ex-wife, Jenny, sat alone at the defendant's table. No lawyer, no family, just a woman in a simple gray dress that looked like it came from a clearance rack, clutching a battered leather suitcase that had seen better days. Harry had laughed when she walked in with that suitcase. Actually laughed. The sound echoed off the marble floors, cruel and sharp. "Is that everything you're taking?" he had whispered loud enough for the gallery to hear. "3 years of marriage and you fit your whole life in that pathetic bag?" Jenny said nothing. She simply placed the suitcase beside her chair and folded her hands. What Harry didn't know, what no one in that courtroom knew, was that the woman he had just mocked owned the very building they were sitting in. She owned the law firm representing him. She owned the bank that held his company's debt. And in exactly 47 minutes, his own lawyer would stand up, see a document he was never supposed to see, and utter 3 words that would destroy Harry Ashford's entire world. "Madam Chairman, This is the story of how the billionaire who laughed at an empty suitcase learned that some women pack light because they already own everything. 3 years earlier, the story began in a place that smelled of burnt coffee and student loans. Jenny Chen was 24 years old, working the night shift at a 24-hour diner in Queens called the Golden Griddle. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her sneakers had a hole near the left toe, and she had exactly $847 in her bank account. Or at least that's what everyone believed. The bell above the door chimed at 2:47 a.m., and Harry Ashford stumbled in with 2 of his fraternity brothers from Columbia Business School. They were drunk, loud, and looking for a place to sober up before their morning finance exam. "3 coffees, Harry slurred, sliding into a booth, "and whatever passes for food in this dump." Jenny approached with a notepad, her expression neutral. "Kitchen's closed. I can do coffee, toast, and eggs." "Then bring it." Harry barely looked at her. "And keep the coffee coming. We've got a test worth more than your annual salary in 6 hours." His friends laughed. Jenny didn't. She returned with 3 mugs, setting them down with practiced efficiency. As she poured, Harry finally looked up at her. Really looked. Even exhausted, even in a stained apron under fluorescent lights. There was something about her. Her eyes held a quiet depth that didn't match the setting. Her movements were efficient but graceful, like someone who had been trained in something far more refined than waitressing. "You go to school?" Harry asked, suddenly curious. "I read," Jenny replied simply. "When I have time." "Read what?" Jenny paused. For a moment something flickered across her face. Amusement, perhaps, or maybe something sharper. "Right now, a market analysis of Southeast Asian semiconductor supply chains. Light bedtime reading." Harry's eyebrows shot up. His friends exchanged confused glances. "You're joking." "I don't really joke." Jenny refilled his cup. "Your exam tomorrow. It's Professor Morrison's class, right? Derivatives and risk management?" Harry sat up straighter. "How do you know that?" "Columbia Business School. Morrison always schedules his finals for 9 a.m. on Thursdays. Thinks it builds character." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Word of advice? He loves questions about the Black-Scholes model's limitations in emerging markets. Write about that, you'll pass." She walked away, leaving Harry staring after her. He came back the next night, and the night after that. Within a month, Harry Ashford, heir to the Ashford Holdings empire, son of one of Manhattan's most ruthless real estate moguls, was convinced he had found a diamond in the rough, a brilliant woman trapped by circumstance, a Cinderella waiting for her prince. He loved the narrative. The billionaire who saw past the apron and the grease stains, the man generous enough to elevate a waitress to high society. What he never bothered to ask was why a woman who could analyze semiconductor supply chains was working in a diner at 3 a.m. He never asked about her family. He never asked about her past. He never asked why she always paid for her own coffee, even when he offered. Harry proposed after 4 months in the private dining room of Le Bernardin with a 6-carat Harry Winston ring that cost more than most apartments. Jenny looked at the ring for a long moment. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. "I've never been more sure of anything." "You don't know anything about me, Harry." He laughed, reaching across to take her hand. "I know everything I need to know. You're smart, you're beautiful, and you need me." Something flickered in Jenny's eyes, a shadow of something that might have been sadness, or might have been a warning. "I need you," she repeated softly. "Of course you do. And I'm going to give you the world, Jenny. Everything you never had." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she slid the ring onto her finger. "Okay, Harry, let's see what kind of man you really are." He took it as acceptance. He should have taken it as a test. The wedding was featured in the New York Times style section under the headline, "Ashford Heir Weds, Queen's Waitress in Fairy Tale Romance." The photos showed Harry in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, beaming at the camera. Jenny stood beside him in a simple Vera Wang gown. Simple because Harry's mother, Victoria Ashford, had insisted that someone of her background shouldn't try too hard. The reception was held at the plaza. 400 guests, a 12-tier cake, champagne that cost $800 a bottle. Jenny's side of the church had 7 people. Co-workers from the diner, a former neighbor. No family. "Orphan," Harry had explained to curious guests, with the practiced sympathy of someone who found the tragedy romantically convenient. "Raised in foster care." It's actually quite inspiring when you think about it. Jenny never corrected him. She stood at the reception, watching her new husband work the room, and a small smile played at the corner of her lips. It wasn't the smile of a blushing bride. It was the smile of someone who had just started a very long game. The first year of marriage was a careful performance. Harry installed Jenny in his penthouse on Central Park West, a $47 million monument to glass and ego that she was allowed to decorate within reason. He gave her a credit card with a $10,000 monthly limit, which he called generous for someone who used to live on tips. He brought her to galas and charity events, always introducing her with the same script. "This is my wife, Jenny. She used to be a waitress. Can you believe it? I found her in this little diner in Queens." Jenny would smile. She would shake hands. She would make polite conversation with women who looked at her like she was something Harry had tracked in on his shoe. She never complained. She never fought back. She simply watched, and she waited. Victoria Ashford made her feelings clear from the beginning. "She's a phase," Victoria told Harry over lunch at the Four Seasons, 6 months into the marriage. "A pretty little rebellion against everything your father and I built. But phases end, darling. And when this one does, you'll need a real wife. Someone from a proper family. Jenny is my wife, Mother. Jenny is a waitress you're playing house with." Victoria sipped her martini. "She doesn't know how to host. She doesn't know how to network. Last week at the Morrison Gala, she spent 45 minutes talking to the caterers instead of the donors. She's adjusting. She's embarrassing." Victoria set down her glass. "Your father built Ashford Holdings from nothing. Do you know what it took? Marriages to the right people, alliances with the right families, and you're jeopardizing all of it for a girl who probably can't tell the difference between a salad fork and a dessert fork." Harry should have defended his wife. Instead, he said, "I'll talk to her." That night, he came home and found Jenny in the kitchen, actually cooking. Something that smelled like ginger and garlic in home. "We need to discuss your behavior," Harry said, loosening his tie. Jenny didn't turn from the stove. "My behavior?" "The Morrison Gala. Mother said you spent the whole night with the staff. The head caterer's daughter just got into MIT. I was asking about the application process." "That's not the point." Harry's voice hardened. "You're not there to make friends with the help, Jenny. You're there to represent me, to represent the Ashford name." Jenny was quiet for a moment. Then she turned off the burner. "And how should I represent the Ashford name, Harry? By being seen, not heard. By smiling and nodding. By not reminding everyone that you used to serve people like them breakfast." The words hung in the air. Jenny's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes went very, very cold. "I see," she said softly. "Smile. Nod. Don't remind them where I came from. Exactly. Harry seemed relieved that she understood. It's not personal, Jenny. It's just how this world works. You'll learn. Yes, Jenny said, turning back to the stove. I'm learning a lot. By the second year, Harry had stopped pretending. The dinners became infrequent, then rare, then non-existent. He came home after midnight most nights, smelling of perfume that wasn't Jenny's, offering excuses that weren't even creative anymore. Business dinner ran late. Client wanted to see a show. Fell asleep at the office. Jenny never accused, never questioned, never cried. She simply started sleeping in the guest room, citing his late hours as the reason. Harry was relieved. It was easier this way. What he didn't know was that Jenny spent those quiet nights in the guest room on her laptop, connected to a secure server that not even the NSA could trace. She wasn't crying into her pillow. She was working. Her name was Meredith Crane, 31 years old, legs that went on forever, blonde hair that was definitely not natural but looked expensive enough that no one cared. She was the senior PR director at Ashford Holdings, hired specifically to manage the company's public image. What she mostly managed was Harry's schedule, and Harry's hotel room bookings, and Harry's lies. Harry met her at the office, introduced by his father as someone who can help polish our brand. Within a month, she was polishing something else entirely. She's sophisticated, Harry told himself. She understands my world. What Meredith understood was that Harry Ashford was weak, vain, and easily manipulated. She understood that his marriage was a joke and his wife was a doormat. She understood that if she played her cards right, she could go from mistress to Mrs. Ashford within 2 years. She was right about almost everything. The only thing she got wrong was Jenny. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday. Harry had forgotten to clear his browser history. Amateur move. Jenny found the hotel receipts, the jewelry purchases, the text messages that were so explicit they would have made a romance novelist blush. She waited for him in the living room, the evidence printed out in a neat folder on the coffee table. Harry walked in at 11 p.m., tie loose, lipstick on his collar that he hadn't even bothered to wipe off. We need to talk, Jenny said. Harry glanced at the folder. His face went through several expressions: surprise, guilt, then something that looked almost like relief. I suppose it was bound to come out eventually, he said, pouring himself a scotch. Look, Jenny, these things happen. Men like me, we have needs. Needs. Complex needs. He took a long drink. Meredith understands my world. She speaks my language. He gestured vaguely at her. You're wonderful, but you're not exactly partner material for where I'm going. Jenny sat very still. Where you're going? The top. Harry's eyes gleamed. Father is retiring next year. I'm taking over Ashford Holdings. That means a wife who can host heads of state, network with Fortune 500 CEOs. Meredith has those skills. He shrugged. You know how to pour coffee. So you want a divorce? I want an upgrade. The cruelty was casual, almost thoughtless. You'll be taken care of. I'm not a monster. $50,000 and you can go back to wherever it is you came from. $50,000. Jenny's voice was flat. For 3 years of marriage. More than fair considering what you came in with, which was nothing. Harry set down his glass. Sign the papers, Jenny. Don't make this ugly. You won't win against my lawyers. Jenny stood up slowly. For the first time in 3 years, Harry saw something in her expression that made him uncomfortable. A smile, small, secret, almost pitying. Okay, Harry, she said softly. Let's go to court. The Manhattan Supreme Court building stood like a monument to justice on Center Street, its Corinthian columns rising toward a sky that threatened rain. Inside courtroom 4B, the divorce proceedings of Ashford versus Ashford were about to begin. Harry arrived with an entourage that could have staffed a small law firm. His lead attorney was Richard Blackwell of Blackwell, Morrison and Associates, the most expensive divorce lawyer in New York, with a reputation for destroying spouses so thoroughly that some never recovered. Behind Harry in the gallery sat Victoria Ashford in head-to-toe Chanel, her expression one of barely concealed triumph. Beside her was Meredith Crane, who had no business being there but had insisted on supporting Harry through this difficult time. Meredith wore a red dress that was entirely inappropriate for court. She wanted Jenny to see her. She wanted Jenny to know she had won. The plaintiff's table looked like a war room. 3 paralegals, 2 junior attorneys. Richard Blackwell himself, with his silver hair and shark smile. A stack of documents thick enough to serve as a doorstop. The defendant's table had Jenny, just Jenny. She walked in alone carrying that battered leather suitcase. No attorney, no paralegal, no family, no friends, no support. She wore a simple gray dress that made her look smaller than she was. Her hair was pulled back in that same practical ponytail from her waitressing days. She wore no jewelry, not even her wedding ring. She looked exactly like what Harry had always told everyone she was. A nobody who had married above her station and was about to pay the price. "Oh my God," Meredith whispered to Victoria, not even trying to hide her delight. "She actually came alone. She's going to represent herself?" "The poor thing," Victoria said, not meaning it at all. "This will be quick." Harry turned to look at his wife. Their eyes met across the courtroom. He smiled, that confident, cruel smile that Jenny had learned to recognize over 3 years. "Nice suitcase," he called out. "Is that everything you're taking? 3 years of marriage and you fit your whole life in that pathetic bag?" A few people in the gallery laughed. Jenny said nothing. She placed the suitcase beside her chair, with careful precision, sat down and folded her hands on the table. Judge Patricia Thornton entered, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She had seen every kind of divorce in her 30 years on the bench. The bitter, the vindictive, the heartbreaking. She had learned not to make assumptions. "Ashford versus Ashford," she announced. "Dissolution of marriage. Is the plaintiff present and represented by counsel?" Richard Blackwell rose with practiced elegance. "Richard Blackwell for the plaintiff, Your Honor. We're ready to proceed." "And the defendant?" Jenny stood. "Jenny Chen, Your Honor. Representing myself." A murmur went through the gallery. Richard Blackwell exchanged a look with Harry. This was going to be easier than they thought. "Ms. Chen," Judge Thornton said, her voice neutral but her eyes sharp, "you understand that you have the right to legal representation? Given the complexity of this case and the resources on the other side, I would strongly advise." "I understand, Your Honor." Jenny's voice was calm, steady. "I've chosen to represent myself." "Very well." The judge shuffled her papers. "Mr. Blackwell, you may present the plaintiff's petition." Blackwell rose like an actor taking the stage. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of marital dissolution. My client, Mr. Harrison Ashford III, is seeking to end his marriage to the defendant on grounds of irreconcilable differences. We are asking for a clean break. No division of assets, no alimony, and immediate termination of all marital obligations." "No division of assets?" Judge Thornton raised an eyebrow. "In a marriage of 3 years? The defendant entered this marriage with no assets to speak of, Your Honor." Blackwell's tone was dismissive. "She was a waitress earning minimum wage when my client, generously I might add, chose to marry her. Everything they have was built by Mr. Ashford, inherited by Mr. Ashford, or created through Mr. Ashford's business acumen." "I see." The judge turned to Jenny. "Ms. Chen, do you contest this characterization?" Jenny stood slowly. "May I ask Mr. Blackwell a question, Your Honor? This is unusual, but proceed." Jenny turned to face the opposing counsel. Her expression was pleasant, almost friendly. "Mr. Blackwell, when you say everything was built by Mr. Ashford, are you referring to Ashford Holdings specifically?" Blackwell frowned. "Among other things, yes. And Ashford Holdings is primarily a real estate development company, correct? Focusing on commercial properties in Manhattan and the tri-state area?" "That's common knowledge." "Common knowledge," Jenny nodded. "So it's common knowledge that Ashford Holdings' biggest project in the last 5 years was the Meridian Tower development? The one that broke ground 2 years ago?" Harry shifted uncomfortably. He didn't like where this was going. "The Meridian Tower is one of our flagship projects, yes." Blackwell's voice was careful now. A $2.3 billion development. Quite impressive. Jenny's voice was still pleasant. Tell me, Mr. Blackwell, do you know who financed that project? Silence. I... The financing was handled through various institutional investors and the primary financing, Jenny interrupted gently, came through a company called Pinnacle Capital Partners, a private equity firm based in Singapore. Are you familiar with it? Blackwell glanced at Harry, who had gone pale. I'm not sure what this has to do with... Pinnacle Capital Partners provided $1.8 billion in financing for the Meridian Tower, Jenny continued. Without that funding, the project would have collapsed. Ashford Holdings would have defaulted on existing loans. The company would have faced bankruptcy. She paused. Did you know that, Mr. Blackwell? Ms. Chen, Judge Thornton interjected. I'm not sure where you're going with this. I'm establishing relevance, Your Honor. Jenny's voice didn't waver. Mr. Blackwell claims that I entered this marriage with nothing, that everything of value belongs to my husband. I'm simply pointing out that my husband's most valuable asset, his company, only exists today because of Pinnacle Capital Partners. And what does that have to do with you? Blackwell snapped. Jenny smiled. It was a small smile, quiet, patient. The smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment for 3 years. I was getting to that, she said. She turned and opened the battered leather suitcase. Inside there were no clothes, no personal belongings, no mementos of a broken marriage. Inside were documents, hundreds of them, organized with tabs and labels, stacked with military precision. Harry stood up, frowning. What is this? Jenny ignored him. She pulled out the first folder and handed it to the court clerk. Your Honor, I'd like to submit this as Exhibit A. It's the corporate registration for Pinnacle Capital Partners, filed with the Singapore Monetary Authority in 2015. Judge Thornton examined the document. Her eyebrows rose. Continue, Ms. Chen. Exhibit B is the ownership structure of Pinnacle Capital Partners. Jenny handed over another document. As you can see, Pinnacle is wholly owned by a holding company called Chen Pacific Industries. The name landed like a bomb. Blackwell's face went slack. Chen Pacific Industries, Jenny continued, is the largest private conglomerate in Southeast Asia. Shipping, manufacturing, technology, real estate, approximately $340 billion in assets across 12 countries. She pulled out another folder. Exhibit C is the ownership structure of Chen Pacific Industries. It's held in a family trust, administered by the Chen family of Singapore. She paused. My family. The courtroom erupted. Harry was on his feet, his face cycling through confusion, denial, and dawning horror. That's not possible. You're a waitress. You're an orphan. I was never an orphan, Jenny said quietly. I was never poor. I was never trapped. She reached into the suitcase and pulled out one final document. Exhibit D, she said, is my birth certificate. Jennifer Chen, born August 15th, to Robert Chen and Margaret Chen, née Liu. She let that sink in. Robert Chen, founder and chairman emeritus of Chen Pacific Industries. My father. Richard Blackwell was sweating. In 30 years of practicing law, he had never, not once, been blindsided this completely. He had walked into this courtroom expecting to crush a helpless waitress. Instead, he was facing the sole heir to one of the largest fortunes in Asia. Your Honor, he stammered, we need a recess. This changes everything. We need time to... You've had 3 years, Mr. Blackwell. Judge Thornton's voice was ice. Surely that was enough time to conduct basic due diligence on your client's wife? We were told, my client assured us, your client assumed. Jenny stood at the defendant's table, and somehow she seemed taller now. The simple gray dress no longer looked meek. It looked like a deliberate choice, like camouflage being shed. He assumed I was nobody because I worked in a diner. He never asked why. He never asked who I was before we met. He never asked about my family, my background, my education. She turned to look at Harry directly. You married me without knowing my middle name, Harry. You married me without meeting a single member of my family. You married me because you liked the story. The billionaire prince rescuing the poor waitress. It never occurred to you that the waitress didn't need rescuing. Harry's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. So let me fill in the gaps. Jenny's voice was steady. I graduated from Stanford with a double major in economics and computer science. Summa cum laude. I completed my MBA at Wharton while you were still failing Professor Morrison's exams. The diner, Harry choked out, was research. Jenny's smile held no warmth. My father wanted me to understand how ordinary people live, how they struggle, how they're treated by people like you. So I spent 2 years working minimum wage jobs across America. Diners, hotels, factories, learning what your kind of wealth does to people. She reached into the suitcase again. And then I met you. The document she pulled out was thicker than the others. Official looking, dense with legal language. This is a forensic audit of Ashford Holdings, Jenny said, conducted over the last 18 months by a team of accountants I personally retained. Harry went white. Your Honor, this is outrageous, Blackwell sputtered. This is a divorce proceeding, not a... It's relevant to the division of assets, Jenny interrupted, and to the question of what exactly I'm entitled to after 3 years of marriage. She handed the document to the clerk. Page 47 details a series of transactions from Ashford Holdings' operating account to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. Approximately $23 million over 18 months. That's business, Harry said weakly. Tax optimization, completely legal. Page 52 shows that the shell company then transferred those funds to a personal account. Jenny's voice was relentless. Your personal account, Harry. The one you used to buy Meredith's apartment, and her car, and that bracelet she's wearing right now. Every head in the courtroom turned to Meredith Crane, who suddenly looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. That's embezzlement, Jenny said simply. Stealing from your own company's shareholders to fund your affair. Your Honor, Blackwell was on his feet. This is character assassination. This has nothing to do with... It has everything to do with this divorce. Jenny cut him off. Because Mr. Ashford isn't just asking me to walk away with nothing. He's asking me to walk away quietly, without revealing what I know about how he runs his business, without revealing that the man who called me a nobody has been stealing from his own family's company to impress his mistress. She turned back to the judge. And that's not even the most interesting part. Exhibit F, Jenny said, pulling out another folder. This is a breakdown of the current debt structure of Ashford Holdings. Harry sank back into his chair. The company is leveraged at approximately 340% of its asset value. You've borrowed heavily against future development profits that may never materialize. If your primary lender called in those loans today, which they have every right to do under the covenant provisions, Ashford Holdings would be insolvent within 90 days. That's confidential information, Harry whispered. I'm a shareholder. Jenny's voice was pleasant. Through Pinnacle Capital Partners, I own 34% of your company's debt. I have access to everything. The color drained from Harry's face entirely. So let's talk about what I actually want from this divorce, Jenny continued. Because it's not your money, Harry. I have more money than you'll make in 10 lifetimes. It's not your properties. I own the building your mother lives in. It's not even revenge. Though I'll admit, watching your face right now is deeply satisfying. She picked up the battered leather suitcase, the one Harry had mocked, the one he thought contained her pathetic belongings, and set it on the table between them. I want you to understand something, she said quietly. I came into this marriage with nothing visible and everything hidden. This suitcase isn't empty because I have nothing. It's empty because I don't need anything from you. Not your money, not your name, not your approval. She clicked the suitcase shut. I never did. The recess was called at 11:47 a.m. Harry stumbled out of the courtroom like a man who had just been told he had a terminal illness. His legal team surrounded him, but there was nothing they could do. Every assumption they had built their case on had just crumbled to dust. Victoria Ashford cornered her son in the hallway. Is it true? Her voice was sharp. The girl, she's really a Chen. I didn't know. Harry's voice was hollow. Mother, I swear, I didn't know. You didn't ask. Victoria's face was ashen. 3 years and you never once thought to verify who you were marrying? She worked in a diner. And you never wondered why a Stanford graduate with an MBA was serving pancakes? Victoria's whisper was vicious. You stupid, arrogant boy. Do you have any idea what you've done? Harry didn't answer. He was staring at something over his mother's shoulder. Jenny was standing at the end of the hallway, speaking into her phone. Her posture had changed completely. Gone was the meek, quiet wife. In her place was someone else entirely, someone who stood like she owned the building, which Harry now realized she probably did. As he watched, a man in an expensive suit approached her. He bowed slightly, actually bowed, before handing her a tablet. Jenny glanced at it, nodded, and handed it back with what looked like instructions. She caught Harry staring. For a moment, their eyes met. Then Jenny smiled, a small, private smile, and turned away. In a private conference room down the hall, Richard Blackwell was having the worst day of his career. We need to settle, he told Harry, immediately, before this goes any further. Settle? Harry slammed his hand on the table. She just humiliated me in open court. She just revealed that she has the resources to destroy you. Blackwell's voice was grim. Do you understand what Chen Pacific Industries is? They have a legal team of over 200 attorneys. They've fought and won cases against sovereign governments. If Jennifer Chen decides to go to war, you won't just lose this divorce. You'll lose everything. But the prenup is worthless, Blackwell exploded. It was written to protect your assets from a penniless waitress. It doesn't account for a wife who's worth 100 times what you are. And frankly, given what she's revealed about your financial management, we're lucky she's not pressing criminal charges. Harry went still. Criminal charges? Blackwell pinched the bridge of his nose. The embezzlement, Harry, the shell company, the diverted funds. If she wanted to, she could take that evidence to the SEC, to the FBI. Your little arrangement with Miss Crane could land you in federal prison. The room was silent. What does she want? Harry asked finally, his voice small. I don't know. Blackwell gathered his papers. But I suggest we go back into that courtroom and find out. When court reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted. The gallery had doubled in size. Word had spread through the courthouse about what was happening in 4B, and every available spectator seat was filled with lawyers, clerks, and curious onlookers who had heard that something unprecedented was unfolding. Harry returned to the plaintiff's table, looking like a man walking to his own execution. Meredith had disappeared, smart enough to know that her presence was no longer an asset. Victoria remained in the gallery, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. Jenny sat alone at the defendant's table, exactly as before. But now everyone in the room saw her differently. The simple gray dress was no longer a sign of poverty. It was a statement. A woman worth hundreds of billions, choosing not to flaunt it. Judge Thornton called the court to order. Before we proceed, she said, I want to acknowledge that the circumstances of this case have evolved significantly. Ms. Chen, I assume you have additional information to present? Yes, Your Honor, Jenny stood. But first, I'd like to address the question of representation. She turned toward the gallery doors. Given the complexity of the matters before the court, I've decided to accept legal counsel after all. The doors opened. A man walked in. He was tall, silver-haired, with the bearing of someone who had argued before the Supreme Court, which, as it happened, he had, twice. Richard Blackwell made a sound like he had been punched in the gut. Jonathan Sterling, he whispered. Jonathan Sterling, founding partner of Sterling & Associates, the most prestigious law firm in the country. He had represented Fortune 500 companies, defended sitting senators, and won cases that legal scholars said were unwinnable. His hourly rate was rumored to be $3, and he was notoriously selective about his clients. He walked directly to the defendant's table and set down a leather briefcase. Jonathan Sterling, appearing on behalf of Ms. Chen, he announced, with the court's permission. Judge Thornton nodded slowly. Mr. Sterling, it's been a while since you've appeared in family court. Unusual circumstances, Your Honor. Sterling's smile was thin. I'm here as a personal favor to an old friend. He glanced at Jenny, a look of genuine affection that seemed out of place in the cold formality of the courtroom. Jenny's father and I went to law school together, he explained. He asked me to look after his daughter's interests. I'm delighted to do so. Harry watched this exchange with growing despair. He had hired the best divorce lawyer in New York. Jenny had just walked in with the best lawyer in America. Now then, Sterling said, taking his seat, I believe we were discussing the division of assets. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a document. Before we continue, I want to make something clear to the court. My client is not here to extract money from Mr. Ashford. She doesn't need it. She's not here to humiliate him. Though I think we can all agree that ship has sailed. A few nervous laughs from the gallery. She's here because 3 years ago she entered a marriage in good faith. She was faithful. She was patient. She endured indignities that would have broken most people, being mocked at parties, dismissed by her in-laws, and ultimately betrayed by a husband who was stealing from his own company to fund his affair. Sterling paused. My client wants one thing from these proceedings: acknowledgement. She wants Mr. Ashford to stand before this court and acknowledge what he did. The lies, the cruelty, the betrayal. And then she wants to walk away with exactly what she brought into this marriage. He gestured to the empty suitcase. Nothing. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Richard Blackwell stood. Your Honor, if Ms. Chen, if my colleague's client, is genuinely willing to forgo any claim to my client's assets, we would obviously be amenable to such an arrangement. There is one condition, Sterling said. Of course there is, Harry thought bitterly. My client wants the court to hear one final piece of evidence before any agreement is reached. Evidence that will provide context for her decisions over the past 3 years. Judge Thornton nodded. Proceed. Sterling pulled out a tablet and handed it to the clerk. This is a video compilation, security footage mostly, along with some recordings made in the Ashford penthouse. Recordings? Harry stood up. You recorded me? That's illegal. That's wiretapping. New York is a one-party consent state, Sterling replied calmly. Ms. Chen was always present for these conversations. She had every right to document them. Your Honor, sit down, Mr. Ashford. Judge Thornton's voice was sharp. You'll have a chance to respond. For now, I want to see this evidence. The clerk connected the tablet to the courtroom's display system. The screen flickered to life. The first clip was from a security camera in the penthouse. Harry was visible in the living room, phone pressed to his ear, pacing. The timestamp showed a date 18 months ago. I know, Harry was saying. She's boring. She's pathetic. But my mother wants me to wait until after the merger announcement. Better optics or whatever. A pause. Yes, of course I still love you. Jenny's just, she's temporary. A placeholder until I can figure out how to get rid of her without it costing me. In the courtroom, Harry's face went red. That's out of context, he said weakly. There's more, Sterling said. The second clip was from what appeared to be a hotel room. Harry was sitting on the edge of a bed, Meredith beside him in a robe. They were laughing about something. She actually asked me about my day, Harry said, mimicking a whiny voice. Like I want to talk to her about anything. I married her because she was convenient, not because I wanted a conversation partner. Meredith laughed. She's so pathetic. Have you seen how she looks at you? Like a lost puppy. The best part is she has nowhere to go. No family, no money, no skills. If I divorced her tomorrow, she'd be back on the streets. And that's why you're stuck with her? For now. Harry leaned back, grinning. But once I take over the company, I'll pay her off. 50 grand and a bus ticket back to whatever hole she crawled out of. Meredith climbed into his lap. God, I love how ruthless you are. The third clip was the worst. It was from a family dinner at Victoria Ashford's townhouse. The camera angle suggested it was taken from a phone propped on a shelf. Jenny's phone, almost certainly. The family was gathered around the table. Harry, Victoria, his father Robert Ashford Sr., and Jenny seated at the far end like an afterthought. I still don't understand why she's here, Victoria was saying, not even bothering to lower her voice. It's a family dinner. She's my wife, Mother. She's a stray you picked up. Victoria sipped her wine. Honestly, Harry, the novelty has worn off. Everyone knows you're keeping her around out of charity. Jenny sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. At least she's quiet, Robert Sr. offered. Last thing we need is some gold digger making demands. Gold digger? Victoria laughed. Please, look at her. She doesn't have the ambition to be a gold digger. She's just nothing. Harry said nothing. He didn't defend his wife. He didn't even look at her. The footage ended. The courtroom was silent. In the gallery, several people were openly staring at Victoria Ashford, who had gone pale. The footage of her calling Jenny nothing was going to end up on every gossip site by dinner time. Harry couldn't look at anyone. "Your Honor," Sterling said, "my client endured this treatment for 3 years. She was mocked, belittled, and betrayed. And through it all, she said nothing. She fought back against nothing. She simply watched." He turned to Jenny. "I think the court deserves to know why." Jenny stood. For the first time since the proceedings began, she addressed the room directly. "I was 24 when I met Harry," she said. "I had just finished business school. My father wanted me to come home to Singapore to start learning the family business, but I asked him for time. I wanted to see America, to understand it." She paused. "My father agreed on one condition. He told me that wealth, real wealth, the kind our family has, can be a prison. It separates you from ordinary people. It makes it impossible to know who to trust. He wanted me to experience what life was like without the family name protecting me. So I took a job as a waitress. Minimum wage. No safety net, at least none that anyone could see. I wanted to know what it felt like to be invisible." Her eyes found Harry. "And then I met you. You walked into that diner at 2 a.m., drunk and arrogant, and you looked right through me. You saw a waitress, a nobody, someone beneath your notice." Jenny's voice was steady. "But then you looked again. You saw something you wanted, so you came back, night after night. You were charming when you wanted to be. You made me laugh. And when you proposed, I thought, maybe I was wrong about you. Maybe underneath all the privilege, there was someone worth knowing." She shook her head. "I was wrong. From the moment we married, you treated me like a prop, a charity case you could parade around to make yourself look generous. You never asked about my life before we met. You never asked what I dreamed about. You never asked if I was happy. And when you started cheating," Jenny's voice hardened, "you didn't even try to hide it. Because why would you? I was just the waitress. What was I going to do about it?" She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small envelope. "This is what I was doing about it." The envelope contained a single document. 18 months ago, Jenny said, I began acquiring debt positions in Ashford Holdings through Pinnacle Capital Partners. Quietly, anonymously. Your company was over-leveraged. Anyone with access to the books could see that. You were borrowing against future profits to fund current expansion. And if anything went wrong, the whole house of cards would collapse. She handed the document to the clerk. As of this morning, entities controlled by my family own 67% of Ashford Holdings' outstanding debt. Combined with our equity position through the Meridian Tower financing, we have effective control over your company's future. Harry stood up so fast his chair fell over. You can't, that's a hostile takeover. It's not hostile at all, Jenny said calmly. It's just business. Something you never bothered to teach me about. Your Honor, Blackwell was on his feet. This is completely outside the scope of these proceedings. Is it? Judge Thornton looked genuinely curious. It seems directly relevant to the question of marital assets and their division. The division is simple, Jenny said. I don't want your money, Harry. I don't want your properties. I don't even want your company. Not really. Then what do you want? Jenny's smile was small and cold. I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember how it felt to be blindsided, to have someone you trusted turn out to be someone else entirely, to realize that you never really knew the person across the table from you. She picked up the battered leather suitcase. That's what you did to me on our wedding night, when you laughed about what a good deal you were getting. That's what you did every time you crawled into bed smelling like her perfume. That's what you did every time you called me nothing behind my back. She turned to address the court one final time. I'm going to walk out of here with exactly what I came in with. Nothing that belongs to Harry Ashford. And he's going to spend the rest of his life knowing that the woman he threw away could have destroyed him with a phone call. She looked at Harry. But I'm not going to, because unlike you, I don't need to tear other people down to feel powerful. The settlement negotiations lasted less than an hour. In the end, the terms were exactly what Jenny had demanded. Nothing. No alimony. No property division. No claim to any Ashford assets. In exchange, Harry signed an acknowledgement of fault, not legally binding in any meaningful way, but public, official, a document that stated in black and white that he had failed his wife, that he had been unfaithful, that he had treated her with cruelty. One last thing, Sterling said, as the final papers were prepared. He produced another document. This is a revised loan covenant for Ashford Holdings' primary credit facility. My client is offering to restructure the debt on favorable terms. Lower interest rate, extended repayment period, no risk of default. Harry stared at the document suspiciously. What's the catch? 3 conditions. Sterling held up a finger. First, Meredith Crane is terminated from Ashford Holdings immediately and banned from any company property. Harry winced but nodded. Second, the $23 million your client embezzled will be repaid to the company within 12 months, out of his personal funds. That's... Harry started to protest, then stopped. He had no leverage. Fine. Third, Sterling's voice softened. My client wants a written apology. Not to her. She doesn't need it. But to the staff at the Golden Griddle Diner, where she worked for 2 years. The owners, Tony and Maria Rossetti, have been struggling to keep the doors open. Your client walked in there multiple times, treated the staff like servants, and never left more than a 10% tip. Harry blinked. You want me to apologize to a diner and make a donation sufficient to cover their operating costs for the next 5 years? Sterling smiled thinly. Call it a lesson in humility. The papers were signed at 4:47 p.m. Judge Thornton declared the marriage of Harrison Ashford III and Jennifer Chen officially dissolved. Jenny packed her documents back into the battered leather suitcase and stood. Sterling shook her hand, murmured something about dinner with her father, and stepped away. Harry remained seated at the plaintiff's table, staring at the wood grain like it held the secrets of the universe. Jenny walked past him on her way to the door. She paused. Harry? He looked up. His face was gray, hollow. The arrogant billionaire prince who had walked into this courtroom that morning had been replaced by something smaller. For what it's worth, Jenny said quietly, there was a moment when I thought we could be happy. When you came into the diner that first night, drunk and ridiculous, I saw something in you. Something lost. Something that needed someone to see beyond the money and the name. She shook her head. But you never let me. You were so busy performing the role of the rescuing prince that you never stopped to notice I wasn't a damsel. I was someone who chose to be there. Someone who could have left at any moment but stayed because I wanted to believe you were better than this. Harry's eyes were wet. Jenny, I don't. Her voice was gentle but firm. Whatever you're about to say, it won't change anything. You are who you chose to be. And I'm done paying the price for your choices. She turned and walked toward the door. She didn't look back. The story of Jenny Chen and Harry Ashford made the papers by morning. The New York Times ran it on the front page of the business section. Ashford divorce reveals heiress hidden in plain sight. The Post went with something cruder. Waitress wife turns tables on cheating billionaire. Within a week, Jenny's face was everywhere. The narrative was irresistible, a modern fairy tale in reverse, where the princess had been pretending to be a pauper all along. What the papers didn't capture was what happened next. 3 months later, Harry Ashford stood in a Queen's diner, holding a check. The Golden Griddle hadn't changed much since the night he'd stumbled in looking for coffee. The same cracked vinyl booths, the same fluorescent lights, the same smell of burnt coffee and late-night hope. Tony Rossetti, the owner, stood behind the counter with his arms crossed. You've got some nerve coming back here, he said. I know. Harry's voice was quiet. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just came to drop this off. He set the check on the counter. Tony picked it up. His eyes went wide. This has a lot of zeros. 5 years of operating costs, plus renovations, plus raises for your staff. Harry couldn't meet his eyes. It was part of an agreement. The divorce thing, with Jenny. Tony's voice softened slightly. We read about it. Everyone did. Tony studied him for a long moment. She worked here for 2 years, he said finally. Night shift, never complained, never missed a day. Half my customers came in just to see her. Not because she was pretty, but because she remembered everyone's names. Remembered what they were going through. She'd slip extra food to the homeless guy who slept on the corner. Thought we didn't notice. Harry said nothing. When she told us she was getting married to some rich guy, we were worried. Thought maybe he'd try to change her. Make her into something she wasn't. Tony shook his head. Turns out we had it backwards. She was never the one who needed to change. No. Harry's voice was barely a whisper. She wasn't. Tony looked at the check again. I'll take your money, he said. My staff deserves the races, and this old place could use some work. But I want you to understand something. He set the check down. You could have had something real. She was the real deal. And you threw her away because she didn't shine the way you wanted her to. That's not a mistake you buy your way out of. That's something you have to live with. Harry nodded. I know. He turned and walked out of the diner, into the harsh light of a Queen's afternoon. Behind him, Tony watched him go, then looked down at the check again. Poor bastard, he muttered. He still doesn't get it. 1 year later, the annual Philanthropy Summit was held at the Waldorf Astoria, a gathering of the world's wealthiest donors to discuss their charitable initiatives, and not coincidentally, to see and be seen. Harry Ashford was there, though he kept to the edges of the room. The past year had not been kind to him. The divorce, the scandal, the public acknowledgement of his embezzlement, it had cost him dearly in social capital. People who used to seek him out now found reasons to be elsewhere. His mother no longer spoke to him. Meredith had moved to Los Angeles and was dating an actor. The company was stable. Jenny's restructured debt had actually saved it. But the victory felt hollow. He was still rich, still powerful, at least on paper. But he had learned something about the difference between wealth and worth. He was nursing a scotch near the bar when a murmur went through the crowd. Harry turned to look, and there she was. Jenny Chen walked into the ballroom like she owned it, which, knowing her, she probably did. She wore an emerald gown that flowed like water, her hair swept up to reveal diamond earrings that caught the light. She moved with the easy confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. She was not alone. On her arm was a man Harry didn't recognize. Tall, Chinese, with kind eyes and a quiet presence. He looked at Jenny like she had hung the moon. Harry watched them work the room. Watched how people gravitated toward Jenny, how her laugh rang out genuine and warm. Watched how completely happy she seemed. He didn't approach. He didn't try to catch her eye. He just watched and remembered and understood, finally, what he had thrown away. The night was winding down when it happened. Harry had just ordered another drink when a presence appeared at his elbow. He turned, expecting some acquaintance looking to gossip. It was Jenny. Harry! Her voice was neutral, pleasant, the voice of someone addressing a stranger. Jenny! He scrambled to straighten up. I didn't think you look wonderful. Thank you. She glanced toward the bar. I wanted to check on you. I heard about your mother. The thing with the charity board. Harry grimaced. Victoria had been quietly removed from the board of the Manhattan Children's Foundation after the video footage from the trial leaked. Her comments about Jenny being nothing had not aged well. It's been difficult for her. I imagine. Jenny was quiet for a moment. I didn't leak that footage, you know. The courtroom video was public record, but the dinner party clip, that was supposed to stay sealed. I know. And he did. His lawyers had traced the leak to a junior associate looking for a quick payday. You didn't do this to destroy us. You just wanted acknowledgement, Jenny finished. That's all I ever wanted, to be seen for who I actually was. Harry looked at her, really looked, maybe for the first time. Who you are, he said slowly, is extraordinary, and I was too stupid and too arrogant to notice. Jenny tilted her head, studying him. You're different, she said finally. The Harry I knew would never have admitted that. The Harry you knew was a fool. He set down his drink. I've been going to therapy, twice a week, trying to understand why I treated people, why I treated you, the way I did. It's hard. Looking at yourself honestly. I know. Her voice softened slightly. But it's the only way to change. They stood in silence for a moment. The man you're with, Harry said. Is he? His name is Michael. A smile touched Jenny's lips. We went to Stanford together. He's a pediatric surgeon now. volunteers half his time at free clinics. He looks at you like you're a miracle. He looks at everyone that way. That's just who he is. Jenny paused. He reminds me of what I was looking for when I walked into that diner. Someone who sees people, not status. Harry nodded slowly. I hope you're happy, he said, and meant it. I am. Jenny reached out and touched his arm briefly. I hope you find that too, Harry. I really do. She turned and walked back into the crowd, back to Michael, back to the life she had chosen. Harry watched her go. He thought about the battered leather suitcase, about the moment in the courtroom when everything he thought he knew had crumbled, about the long, hard year of learning to look at himself honestly. He thought about what Jenny had said, about the difference between wealth and worth. And for the first time in his life, Harry Ashford decided to find out if it was possible to become someone different. 5 years later. The New Horizons Children's Center opened its doors on a crisp September morning in Brooklyn. It was a state-of-the-art facility, medical care, education, and support services for underprivileged children, all under one roof. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew a crowd of dignitaries, donors, and press. But the biggest surprise was the name on the building's dedication plaque. The Jenny Chen Center for Children, founded with a gift from the Harry Ashford Foundation. Harry stood at the edge of the crowd watching the ceremony. He wore a simple suit, nothing flashy, nothing designed to impress. His hair had started to gray at the temples. He didn't give a speech, didn't seek attention. He just watched. When the ceremony ended and the crowd began to disperse, a woman approached him, professional-looking, holding a tablet. Mr. Ashford, I'm from the Times. We're doing a piece on the center. Can I ask why you named it after your ex-wife? Harry considered the question. Because she taught me something, he said finally. She taught me that the measure of a person isn't what they have. It's how they treat people who can't do anything for them. He looked at the building, the bright windows, the colorful murals, the children already starting to peek out from behind the curtains. I treated her like she was nothing because I thought she had nothing. I was wrong. She had everything that mattered. I was the one who was empty. He turned back to the reporter. This building won't make up for what I did, but maybe it'll help some kids believe that people can change, that where you start isn't where you have to finish. He started to walk away, then paused. One more thing. Whatever you write, make sure you mention her foundation, the Chen Foundation for Women in Business. They're doing incredible work helping women start companies. They could use the publicity more than I could. He walked away before she could ask another question. Across the city, Jenny Chen, now Jenny Lin, sat in her office at Chen Pacific's New York headquarters. The view from the 87th floor was staggering, but she rarely looked at it. She was reviewing applications for the foundation's latest round of grants when her assistant knocked. There's something you might want to see. The assistant handed her a tablet. On the screen was a live feed of the ribbon-cutting ceremony in Brooklyn. The camera focused on the dedication plaque, the Jenny Chen Center for Children. Jenny stared at the screen for a long moment. She thought about Harry, the Harry she had known, and the Harry he seemed to have become. She thought about the strange, winding path that had brought them both here. She thought about her father's words all those years ago. Wealth can be a prison. The only way out is to learn what truly matters. Maybe, she thought, she wasn't the only one who had learned. She set down the tablet and looked out the window. Somewhere in the vast sprawl of New York, Harry Ashford was starting over. And somewhere in Singapore, her father was probably smiling. The past, she realized, wasn't a weight anymore. It was a lesson. And the best lessons in the end are the ones that teach us to do better. And that, my friends, is the story of how a battered leather suitcase brought a billionaire to his knees. Harry Ashford walked into that courtroom thinking he was about to crush a helpless waitress. Instead, he discovered that the woman he had mocked, belittled, and betrayed was stronger than anyone he had ever known. He laughed at her empty suitcase, not realizing that some people pack light because they already own everything that matters. It's a brutal reminder about the danger of assumptions. Harry looked at Jenny and saw what he wanted to see. A charity case, a project, a stepping stone. He never bothered to look deeper. He never asked the questions that might have revealed the truth. And by the time he understood his mistake, it was too late to do anything but live with it. The ultimate karma wasn't financial ruin or public humiliation. It was spending the rest of his life knowing that the greatest person he ever met had been right there, waiting to be seen, and he had looked right through her. So let me ask you, was Jenny's approach, the patient, watching, waiting approach, more powerful than confrontation would have been? And do you think Harry deserved the chance to change, or should some mistakes be permanent? Let me know in the comments below. If this story of karma, revelation, and unexpected power moved you, please smash that like button. It helps the algorithm share these stories with more people who need to hear them. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We post tales of betrayal, redemption, and sweet justice every week. And remember, be careful how you treat the people you think are beneath you, because you never know who's watching, who's waiting, and who's keeping score. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.